All right. Welcome, everyone. I am really, really, really excited again to have the incomparable Mr. Miguel McInnis for our live. Here's what I'm going to tell y'all you need to do is to make sure you are you have a pen and a paper with you because he's going to drop some knowledge and probably some words that you're going to want to look up. I'm always enjoy speaking with him, but I do carry seriously, all seriousness aside, I do carry a journal when so I can write because he'll ask a question and he'll say, have you heard of so and so, such and such? And I'm like, write that down, come back to it so that I can be just as knowledgeable as this Yale, right? You went to
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
don't let me get it wrong, right? This Yale graduate. So today I've invited Miguel, and you all may know him from before, but he is the CEO of Metro Health DC, and he can tell us a little bit more. But I really want to just jump right in. We were talking about navigating the storm, and I know so many people have asked, what's that about, Pam? What's going on? It's really more than just some of the current dynamics that we've been facing with regards to the pandemic and some of the civil unrest stuff. It's bigger than that, and I thought of no one better than Miguel McInnis who could come and talk to us about these dynamics. So, Miguel, I want to turn it over to you and just kind of kick us off. What comes to mind when you talk about navigating the storm? You say it's bigger than the pandemic and for businesses and the stuff that we've been dealing with. What is this about?
First off, I want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to join you again.
Always.
I always look forward to our conversations, and I'm always engaged, and I'm always you keep me on my toes. So I appreciate the opportunity to join you on this LinkedIn Live. And so when you start to think about the storm, especially if you think about the last year we've had,
Hmm.
it's been a challenge. I mean, especially for those of us here in the DC area, and also for those nationally and globally, in terms of being able to navigate the business environment when, for a portion of our time, we were sequestered.
Yes.
And it's hard to run a business when you can't meet with your customers.
Yes.
And we are a primary care business here based in the DC market, and that was a big challenge for us. I mean, it forced us to have to think about other means. We had to move to telehealth as an option during that transition, and it was a challenge. And I think when you start to think about preparing for a storm, you know what this last year taught me, or at least reminded me of, was just you know how you have to be prepared. Sometimes you don't really think about that in business. Your head's down, you're
Yep.
focused on trying to get through the business problem of the day, of the week, of the year, but you don't necessarily focus on potential storms that come about.
Right.
And it's funny because over the last 3 years, it reminded me of sailing, because I started sailing with some friends recently, and one of the things I learned, and this process reminded me of, is what we do when we go out.
Yes.
Normally when we go out, we're sailing, sail out of Annapolis, and we sail in the bay, and we've gone down to St. Michael's, St. Mary's, and some other places. But one of the things it reminded me of is the fact that before we get up, before we pull out of the dock,
Hmm.
we do a check. We
Yep.
prepare. So we'll walk. We're on the boat, checking the boat, making sure things are in place, things that we have, that we need for our trip. And I think sometimes in business we don't necessarily always do that on a consistent basis.
Right.
In addition to that, I also think sometimes, you know, we take it for granted. I have a business. I have a strategic plan.
Yes.
I went through that process to with my board on an annual basis. But
Hmm.
that's a document that has to be a living document, and that's part of the preparation process. the first step is really to prepare for the storm. And a lot of time, what that means is really, do I have an understanding of the environment that I'm in? And so, a lot of times, you know, well, before we go out, we check the weather. We need to make sure, is there a storm coming? Is there anything that we need to be aware of? And I see that a lot of times, the analogy in business would be really understanding the business market environment,
Yeah.
and understanding potential disruptions to the business market environment. And we see COVID as being one of those unexpected disruptions.
Yes, it really was.
And it was a disruption that, for a lot of businesses here in the district, a lot of companies closed.
Yeah. They
I mean,
couldn't, they just weren't. Well, but why, let me ask you, why do you think that they weren't? When you talk about that whole preparation piece and then understanding the environment, why do you think that so many organizations, so many businesses, like all types and sizes businesses, industries, etc., why do you think they did not survive?
I think for a lot of them, it was they were caught off guard.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't necessarily understand how to navigate the operational challenge that was presented.
Yeah.
I think, for at least for a lot of practices here in the district, for a lot of folk, they just didn't have the capital to keep going.
Wow.
And it's one of those things where, when you're, when things are going well, you never think about putting money aside, or just thinking about what I need to do in the event there's a potential disruption.
Yeah.
But what COVID has shown us is the fact that we always have to be prepared.
Yes.
Because if you don't understand your environment, and understand that there's opportunities for disruption, especially with the way technology is occurring right now,
Mm-hmm.
then you're not prepared to last.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think one of the interesting things that we're seeing in the healthcare space is the fact of the level of innovation and disruption that's taking place. Players that are coming into healthcare that we wouldn't expect. I mean, recently Best Buy announced that they're forming a healthcare group. I would have never thought of that.
Wow.
Think about that.
That's right.
A retail technology company is now getting into healthcare.
Yep.
All right. So for many of us, particularly in primary care, we're looking at this from the perspective: what does this mean?
Yes. Yes.
And how do we start to understand? Because this is a impending storm.
Yes.
And so we need to, one of the things that I and my board are starting to understand and look at is, how will this potential entrant into our market influence the dynamics of our market?
So is this like for people who are watching and maybe they're not in healthcare?
Yeah.
Like, is this sort of like, what you shared with me before? I told you I took notes. Yeah, like when you talk about preparing for a storm,
Right.
like checking the weather, like
Yeah.
looking at what's happening around you, like, is this some of that for any industry, any environment, any business?
Yeah, I mean, I think really when you're checking, I'm a strong believer, check the weather.
Yeah.
Make sure that you have the relationships, whether through associations,
Mhm.
whether through mastermind groups,
Mm.
different forums to understand what's going on in your market.
Yeah.
Trade papers, these are the things that are important to understand what are the shifts that are taking place within your marketplace and how you need to prepare for that. I think the other thing too is starting to also understand what your course is.
Yeah.
Because the other thing is, we always talk about having a strategic plan and strategic vision, a mission statement, all these other things. But do we have an operational plan that really reflects and takes into consideration the constant or impending changes that are going to take place within my marketplace? Are there things that I'm constantly having to look at and to reconsider? And one of the things I've found has been, and this has been, and I know that I've been guilty of this, is, you know, we have our boards of directors and we have our advisory groups, and we're always talking about the issues of the day,
Yeah.
but not necessarily talking about strategic issues.
Got it.
And that's part of how you stay and plot the course, because you need to be talking about what's going on now and
Yeah.
what potentially is going on in the marketplace. Because if I'm only focusing on operational issues, like in my business, which is patient care delivery, and I'm not talking about the potential new entrants or the changes in reimbursement that's taking place, then how am I going to make sure that the course I've plotted is going to get me to where I want to go?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so part of this has to do with the constant having the relationships to check in, and then also understanding, is the course that I've plotted still relevant
Mm.
to where I need to go?
Wow.
Because, you know, when you start to think about a lot of times, we look at something as simple as you know, what has occurred in my business. We're now looking at a Best Buy going into the marketplace. They're looking at using technology to basically provide care within remotely
Yeah.
for patients. Well, you know what? If I've invested in brick and mortar, that's a
Oh,
problem for me.
yes.
That means I have a carry cost that my competitors don't.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so, how am I going to react in that marketplace, in that situation, in order to be relevant to the shifts that are going to be taking place and the new expectations that patients will have?
Hmm.
So, you know, again, being able to understand how, you know, have the has the course that I'm plotting still relevant to what's going on in my marketplace, and then also that then leads into what I call a safety check,
Yep.
because then you start thinking about, am I going to be here if I continue down this road? Am I going to be here? And that's a very difficult
Very.
conversation to have, as
Yeah.
well as the conversation of, do I have the right human capital? Do I have enough financial capital to take this journey? Do I have the social capital?
Yeah.
You know,
So
we
you're saying, like, this is scenario planning
yeah
101, but amped up a little, right? It's
yes
like not just looking at what the current need is and responding or reacting to
right
that need. Because if we've planned, then we can respond properly. If we've not planned, then we're reacting, and we're
exactly
probably going to use more resources,
exactly
resources, financial resources, all of those things. And so what I hear you saying is, this is a time to really get into a place where we understand what the different scenarios are, do some of the homework and the research and
yep
figure those things out, and then navigate through some of those challenges, knowing that things have changed. Now,
yep
what do you say to people who believe that they're going to go back, that yeah, I might be brick and mortar, but and I might be taking a hit right now, but we're going to go back, everything's going to go back to everybody going to be back together, and things are just they're going to bounce back, we're going to rebound and
right.
recover. What are your thoughts?
I mean, my thought is, COVID has shown us that things are going to be very different.
Hmm.
Who would have thought something as simple as shopping? You know, one of the things I used to look forward to with my wife and my family is just going to the supermarket, because then we're going through the aisles, picking up what we're going to need, what we want, or whatever the case may be.
Tasting food, all the flavors
Exactly.
and the samples. We ain't doing that no more.
Exactly. But what's funny now is DoorDash,
Yes.
Amazon, all these other players have now taken something that we're so used to
Yeah.
out of the equation. Not saying that we won't be doing any of that. We'll probably be doing it less.
Yes.
And I've seen that in our own household. I
Yeah.
mean, we're ordering things online much more than we did prior to COVID.
Yeah.
And so I think part of the issue that I think that a lot of businesses fall into the habit of, well, my business is so unique and so different that you know what, I'll be safe. No, no, change always happens.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is, it takes more energy to go back than to go forward.
Yes.
And I think what happens is that um, at the end of the day, if an organization isn't really thinking about how it's going to react to the shifts in the market and how to plan for that when the times are good, when they're in the middle of it, that's not the time to do it. You should
Right.
have at least have a plan in place. And I think when you're in the middle of the storm, and I can tell you, for us, when we were dealing with the issue of COVID, and then we were dealing with the issue of the insurrection issues and this and that that were going on in DC,
Yeah.
you started, one of the things I had to constantly do for my team was to remind them that this may be long, but it's not forever.
There you go.
Let's keep our eyes focused on what our goal is.
There you go.
And that's important, especially when you're in the middle of the storm. Because I think so many times it's easy just to focus on, I just got to deal with this issue right now. Because what will happen is you become so myopic that you're focusing on issue to issue to issue to issue. And you could be moving off course and you don't realize how far you're off course until all of a sudden you raise up your head and you're like, where am I?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how do you help those leaders who know they're off course or they're heading off course and they are struggling with how to make it back, how to get back on? They don't maybe not even have, they may not have the expertise, the knowledge,
Mhm.
the insight to know, and they're looking around their boat sailing and they realize it might not be in the boat. Now what do we do? Like, what do you say to those leaders
Well, I
who's
mean,
struggling?
I think at that point you then have to figure out, what do I have?
Hmm.
Assess what you have,
Okay.
and then start to figure out, from what I have, where do I need to be? And then sort of plot backwards as to what do I need to get back onto course. Because, so, like, for example, you know, a lot of times, one of the issues that we faced was the fact that as we made the transition to telehealth in our business, which was a very quick transition for us. When
Yeah.
we had prior to COVID, we were only doing 10% of that as part of our business, and then post COVID, it increased. I mean, during COVID, it increased exponentially, and we realized that we had to do a lot of things very quickly in terms of training staff, in terms of making sure the infrastructure was there and the capacity was there. And so for us, what we had to end up going through was figuring out, where are we?
Yes.
What do we need to do in order to meet this business challenge?
Hmm.
And then, more importantly, start to plot in terms of, as we're starting to meet the challenge, how do we normalize this as part of our cost of business going forward? Because we recognize that there's now going to be a shift in expectation of our customers,
Yes.
and our patients, in the fact that the convenience that for that it provided was something that they now are looking as a part of their overall experience. And
Yeah.
so these are things that we had to start to do. And we actually had to go out and reach out to other resources. So, for example, we reached out to our trade association, we reached out to our channel partners, technology channel partners, to say, hey, we have this business challenge. We need to figure out how we're going to create the bandwidth to accommodate this new shift in care delivery. Can you help us? And
Yeah.
here's the funny part is, many of your channel partners, they're in the same situation.
Yeah.
So they're willing to help you. You just got to ask.
Exact. So I was going to ask you, I was going to say, okay, so there ain't no shame in your game.
Right.
You have all your players, all of your leaders, putting their feelers out there. And I've
Right.
heard you say before, it's important to have a network
Yep.
that can actually work for you and work
Yep.
with you.
Yep.
Without that network, some of your, in fact, with that network, some of your most pressing challenges can be resolved with the touch of a key or the dialing of the phone, just
Yep.
hitting some keys, and to connect with people and say, hey, I'm having this challenge. So building that trust group is critically
Yep.
important. And a lot of people are stuck right there because they ain't got nobody they can go to. They haven't built that personal network of individuals that they can actually reach out to when they're.
That's true. And
Mhm,
you know what? Here's the thing that I think the one thing that we didn't necessarily talk about is when you're in the middle of the storm,
mhm.
recognizing that you may have to let go of some people.
Wow.
Some
Wow.
people are just not storm worthy.
Wow.
And that's a very difficult conversation to
Mhm.
have, and a difficult situation, difficult thing to come to the realization when
Mhm.
you're in that situation. There's some
Yep.
people who cannot handle storms.
Wow.
And so, as a senior leader, you're going to have to start to think about, is this the right person that's going to continue with me on this journey?
So
Because
so you started this,
some,
so we know when you want people, and it's important, not just
yep,
you, but what I'm hearing is folks who have a network of people that
yep,
they can go to. They have their own personal board of directors or whatever it is we're calling it. They have people in their network that they can go to when you or organizationally you run into challenges. That's like the answer to the reason why we need to build a network, right?
yep.
And then what else do you look for when you're looking for key talent that is a part of that C team, that senior team to help you navigate the storm?
I think part of the other thing is, are they someone who can stay on course and keep focus within their area? So if it's the CFO, can he be able to um, plot on the fly any changes that need to occur as we're going through this storm, things that we may need to circumnavigate, but still allowing us to stay on course.
Yes.
If
Yes.
it's my COO, is he able to react in order to address some of the operational issues as we're in the midst of this storm, and starting to think through how we get past the storm?
Yeah.
Or even my human resources director, how do we start to think about talent? Because one of the things this COVID situation has shown us is it also created a very different expectation from a human resources perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
We There are people now. We're now having to think about hybrid work environments when before that wasn't really a thing. I mean, it
Yes.
occurred, but it was not necessarily to the extent or the expectation that
Yeah.
we're seeing it now.
Yeah.
And then also the other thing that we're having to deal with that COVID has shown us is not everybody can work by themselves.
Yeah, true. Right. So we can't just close the doors and turn off the lights and say everybody go home because
Right,
productivity will take a nosedive. And
right.
one of the things I've been telling leaders is, it's up to us to know how do we measure productivity,
Yep,
then hold people accountable to that. That
right,
way, you can assess whether or not this person that you sent to work from home is successful
right.
or not. But we haven't really developed those measures. If we haven't developed those measures, it's going to be really tough to know whether a working from home arrangement is going
Yep.
to be good for that individual. Because maybe not all individuals in the business need to do that. But you're absolutely right. Um, Not everyone is likes doing that, and so
And
about
and
them.
the other thing too is also what this COVID experience has shown us is you have to really think about how you still maintain the culture.
Yeah.
And that is something that's really that I'll be honest with you. I've always believed that organizational culture sort of evolves. But what this showed me, this experience during COVID, is it's not, you have to nurture it.
Yeah.
It's like a plant. You have to do things in order to maintain it. And I
Mhm.
think that's one of the challenges that I think post COVID we're now having to face
Mhm.
is how do we continue in these new work environments and new expectations of productivity? How do we maintain the culture?
Yes.
How do we create support for individuals? Because also the other thing too is that not everyone is prepared to work in a remote environment, but also not everyone has the environment that supports remote work.
Exactly. Exactly.
And these are the things that you have to start thinking about as in this new marketplace. And I think part of the challenge, especially, and that's part of the whole issue of as you're going through the storm or weathering the storm, it is really being able to have the key individuals to help you think through a lot of these business questions that come up.
Yeah.
And how do we start to think about that? Because I think sometimes, and that's why I say that not everyone can weather the storm, because there's some people who they only go back to one thing.
They got one trick pony. One
One trick
trick.
pony. That's right. And you start to realize that that's a problem, because if they're not adaptable,
Mm.
and they can't necessarily move with the changes that are taking place,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to impact your ability of your business to be responsive and reactive to market dynamics.
Okay, so let me ask you.
Mhm.
Let's say you have, and I know that you don't, but let's say that you have some folks, maybe one person, one or two
Mhm.
people in leadership, and
Mhm.
you're realizing they are a one trick pony, but they
Yep.
are committed. They are like, I want to learn, I want to recover, I want to help recover, I want to get in there. And we've talked about going out and building a network, but it might be a little too late because you
Yep.
already got water coming in. You're taking in water. What do
Right.
you say to those individuals that are like, I'm not quitting. I really want to stay and I want to roll up my sleeves and help us navigate this storm. And it's choppy and I'm getting banged up, but I'm ready to
Mhm.
stay and help navigate the storm.
I think part of it is um, assessing what they can bring and
Yeah.
what they can do to help us get through this storm.
Gotcha.
There's certain, like on a boat, there's certain things that need to get done. And you need okay, I need you to man the sails. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. And so being able to understand that what role that they play and allow them to play to their strengths. Because this is not the time, while you will learn through the experience, this is not the time to learn necessarily. Does that make sense? Because we're
Yeah.
now in the midst of a crisis. We need to work through that process.
Yeah. So it may be too late. Once you're in the middle and you already taken in water, you can't exactly hop out the boat and figure out how to plug it up. You got to figure out you it's sink or swim. We may have to throw your butt overboard and
Exactly.
just do with what we have, feed you to the sharks so we can try to save the rest of us in here. So yeah, what I hear you saying is sometimes that can be hurtful to the organization. And so
Yep.
you have to be more intentional in the talent that you're looking at to bring on
Yep.
this next go round, right? So,
Yep.
what are some
And
lessons you've learned? Go ahead.
And I think part of the other thing too is, storms. I always think that, we look at them and we say, you know what, they're challenges, but I also see them as opportunities
Yeah.
because it shows me where I'm weak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what does the old adage say? What doesn't kill you make you stronger.
Yeah.
And you start to realize that there's opportunities of where your gaps are. So
Yes.
what the storm will do is show you where your gaps are.
Yeah.
I think the big thing is remembering and trying to plug those gaps.
Okay.
Because sometimes when when we're in the middle of the storm, we see where the gaps are, we're
Mm-hmm.
able to navigate it,
Mm-hmm.
but then we forget about it. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a one off. No, no. The reason why it came up was because it's a problem.
Right. Right.
So
And
therefore, I need
recognize.
to address whatever that problem is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that's important. But still, while we're in the storm, one of the things I also definitely realized, and this is what I had to do, was always remind people of where we're going.
Yeah.
What's our end goal?
Mm-hmm.
Our end goal is we are committed to providing excellent patient care. Now, it may not be the same way we provided care last year
Right.
because patients people are being sequestered,
Mm-hmm.
but that does not impact our ability to provide excellent care.
Yeah.
And so, reminding, I think it's important as a senior leader, whatever area of the organization that you're in, is to
Mm-hmm.
exude the level of confidence, to keep your team focused on what the main goal is, while all these other things are happening, but also at the same time, getting them, helping them not to lose confidence,
Yeah.
because it can be shaking. It
Yeah.
can be very trying, and sometimes you have to make sure that you have someone there who can nurture,
Yes.
and be able to provide the support, because change is not always easy for everybody, and
Right.
so you have to also be prepared to help people to understand that the change is here. How do we navigate that change, and putting the resources and supports um, to help them navigate the change. But
Mm-hmm.
also, the other thing too is, I think we also have to be honest. A
Yeah.
lot of times, sometimes we're in the midst. Things can be, you know, house is on fire, everything's about to cave in, and you're like, oh, you know what? Everything's gonna be good. Things gonna be fine. If there's a fire, there's a fire. We
Right.
all need to get out. But at
Right.
the same time, how we get out or
Yes.
how we react
Yes.
is important.
It
And
is.
I think that's the part that I think, as a senior leader, is, when we're in the midst of a storm, you have to be able to exude confidence, but
Mm-hmm.
also at the same, be realistic. Do not, one thing you cannot afford to do is to paint an unrealistic picture, because you lose confidence and
Yes.
people will lose faith in you.
Yes. They do.
And I've seen that happen, because people will say, well, you told me. Yeah, I did. So, that's one thing I've learned, is that you definitely have to be realistic. You have to be you have to be transparent, but also at the same time, be able to help people understand how we're going to navigate this thing.
Yeah. So, you and I have talked about, that saying that you're either going into a storm, you're in a storm, or you're
Right.
coming out of a storm.
Right.
Talk to us about folks who feel like we're coming out of the storm. We've done a lot of the things that you've said, Miguel,
Mm-hmm.
and we're coming out of this storm from a financial talent perspective, all of those different things, and we feel like we've done a great job of recovering.
Yep.
And what's some advice? What are some insights that you have for those leaders in organizations?
You know what? I always call it repair after a storm.
Okay, okay,
Um, Sometimes you just got to pull into a safe harbor and assess what happened.
okay. Mm-hmm.
Start to identify, do an after action. Okay, what worked, what didn't work?
Yeah.
What are the gaps that were identified, and what do we have to fix? Because, sometimes, like I had alluded to earlier, we get so focused on it's over,
Mm. And we
and now,
celebrating, we partying.
right, and but we forget that there were some things that were identified, and if you don't address them, they can be the next storm.
Yes.
And so that's the thing I've learned, has been really to take the time to really assess um, what worked, what didn't work, where are we, and then more importantly, if we've dropped off course,
Mm-hmm.
how do we start to recalibrate to get back on course?
Yes. Yeah.
Because every storm is going to push you off course. The question is, how far?
Yes. How much do you think leaders assess themselves? From CEO and the team, like that group, so important. Sometimes they want to point fingers out to
Yeah.
other people, and you're the problem. You're the problem. And sometimes it's that thumb that's coming back your way.
Yep.
and you are part of the problem. How can leaders do a better job of assessing themselves and either getting it together very quickly in a short period of time or getting out of the way?
Well, it's definitely not waiting until the annual review. I can tell you that.
Right, right.
Because at that point, it's too late.
Too late. Yeah, can't help
But
you.
I think, what I found for me has been, I call it my board of advisors. I
Mm,
have individuals that either are individuals that I trust and I feel comfortable on my board of directors, members, colleagues of mine, or individuals with whom I have a very good business relationship
mm,
that I'm constantly talking to, asking questions, and assessing. Hey, how do you think about this? What do you think about that? Here's a problem that came up. Give me your thoughts, because they can give you perspective because they're in a position to see you as you are. I
yeah.
realize very clearly I'm biased.
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm always doing good, but I realize that's not realistic.
Right.
And I need someone who can be really frank
Hmm.
and who can he can tell me the more difficult things. And those are the people who make up my board of advisors, my personal board of advisors,
Yeah.
because they can help me to see me in a way that I don't see myself.
Yeah. So people you trust to speak the truth in love, but to just speak the
Exactly.
truth. Yeah.
Exactly. And,
Yeah.
and the thing about it is it has to be people in different forms. So in other words, like I said, I have and the other thing I do is I have actually a weekly meeting with a member of my board, not my board chair, but a member of my board who I bounce ideas off of. And he can tell me, I'm like, and he'll sit in meetings and even do this with my board chair as well. I do an after action after meetings. How do you think this went well? What could we have done better? What are opportunities for the next conversation or discussion or what have you? Because it's important, because the small course corrections will keep you on track,
Absolutely.
and it will help you avoid going off course.
I
And
find that go ahead.
and so that to me is so important in terms of as a senior leader because it's difficult. No one wants to hear that, what, you're not great. I love to believe that I have the best 3-point shot, but
Come on.
don't put me on the court.
Right. You'll knock some people in their kneecaps. It might be some of the teammates,
Let me tell you
but you
something.
won't
I'm
get that
building
three
bricks. I
points.
can tell you that. I'm building bricks.
Right, right. Well, it's so interesting you say that because as what I find that I've and from a brand perspective
Mhm.
have emerged into is more of that thought partner for that
Mhm.
exact reason. It's because executive coaching is fantastic,
Right.
but you have to know when you are the executive coach or when you're in my space when your client needs coaching, right?
Yep.
Sometimes they just need a thought partner,
Yep.
and sometimes they need an advisor because
Yep.
they don't have 6 months for you to ask them some super powerful questions for them to get to the answer. They taking in
Yep.
water and they need to call somebody now, right? And so I joke with a lot of my new clients when we go through that interviewing phase. It's like, look, I'm gonna give you my cell phone number so you can call me on that Sunday afternoon when you've gotten that call from somebody else about something else is happening
Right.
because we can work through it together. If we wait till next Wednesday at 3 p.m. for our call, it's too late. And now
Exactly.
we're just talking about what happened. So it's having that thought partner that can help you work through and navigate some of the challenges that you face.
And you raise a great point. Having a board of advisors is important, but also it's very different
Yeah.
than having a thought partner
Yep. Yep.
because, an advisor is really going to speak from their area of expertise,
Hmm.
and will provide counsel from that perspective. The
Yeah.
point that you made about the thought partner is sometimes I just need to run an idea by,
That's
a
it.
bounce, and I know I just need to get the idea out
Yep.
and bounce it off, and that's a very different conversation.
It is. It is.
And so you raise a great point about the importance of the thought partner
Mm-hmm.
as well as the advisor, because you need both,
Yeah.
especially as a senior leader, because there's some things I can go to an advisor and ask because they have the expertise in this area.
Yeah.
But there's sometimes they're not great people to bounce ideas off of.
Right.
They're just not the right person.
No, because you know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna tell you how you're supposed to do it, and
Exactly.
do it that way. But don't look. If you come back to me and tell me you did it, don't look.
Don't call
No,
me again. Don't
don't
call
call
me.
me no more.
That's what
Right.
this is right here.
But yeah, so when people are they've weathered, now they're coming out of
Yep.
the storm. How do they recuperate? What are some tips
You
that
know
you?
what? And this is something I had to learn. You know, I'm a traditional management consultant. I mean, I
Yeah.
worked for Deloitte and Ernst and Young years ago, and you know, we never really celebrated after projects or things like that. But it's funny. I actually ended up hiring a chief operating officer when I ran another organization years ago.
Uh-huh.
And he really helped me to understand and appreciate the importance of celebration.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's important because
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, we prepare for the storm, we go through the storm, we assess and analyze what worked, what didn't work, where the gaps are, and we're on to the next thing. But the problem is you haven't celebrated the fact of we're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what ends up happening is that people need that release.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you're not necessarily being conscious of it, or if that's not in your personality type, I think it's important as a senior leader to find somebody in your organization who has that.
Yes. Exactly.
Because that is where the culture, the ability to hone the culture, create a more cohesive culture,
Mm-hmm.
is through that celebration. Because you know when you're able to say we did this together,
Yeah.
everyone can feel a part of this process, and I
Yeah.
think that's the part where it's the exhale and the celebration. Is so important. And that's one of the things, like I said, I really appreciated about this individual in helping me to understand that,
Yeah.
because I recognized that after that coming to that awareness, I
Mm-hmm.
saw a very big difference, and it's actually helped me a lot in my future engagements and my current engagement and organizations I've run or clients I've counseled. You know,
Yeah.
is the fact that once we've accomplished something, hey, we did a great job. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And being able to celebrate that and then moving on.
Absolutely. Well, Miguel, I want to give you a chance to think about some final words and just let everyone know. One, I am just so extremely excited to have this conversation. As you can tell, uh, he's just a really cool guy to get to know and to work with. So, please make sure that you reach out to Miguel and LinkedIn, connect with him. Maybe he has some additional insights and can and maybe be a part of your own personal board of directors. But I know how busy he is, so I ain't gonna pimp him out like that. But but I tell you, he's definitely one that you want to keep in your circle. But Miguel, I really appreciate this concept of storms because there are people who are just in all stages
Yep.
that you talked about. What final thoughts do you have about this topic?
First, again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to join you on this conversation. I always enjoy our times together. But I think the three things that I would leave is prepare,
Mhm.
weather, and repair.
Mm, I like that.
Prepare for a storm, not when you're in the storm, but before, during the blue days, the sunny days.
Right.
When you're weathering the storm, keep the destination
Yeah.
top of mind. Where are we going? What's the course? Making sure that you're communicating that to your team, making sure that you're transparent and being realistic in painting the picture of what's going on, but also at the same time helping them to navigate that in whatever way that's necessary.
Mhm.
And then once you've gotten through the storm, do the repairing.
Yeah.
You know, pull into the safe harbor. Look what worked, what didn't work. Let's talk about it. Let's take it serious and let's try to address those concerns, and then also celebrate,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that celebration is where the connection will be, the opportunity to rebuild for the next storm.
Absolutely. Well, Miguel McInnis, CEO of Metro Health DC, that DC is important. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure. It always is. I encourage folks to continue to heed to his insights and his lived experiences. If you are interested in being a member or joining one of these lives, please hit me up on LinkedIn. If you have a person that you'd like for me to interview, please let me know. Always interested in hearing and putting other thought leaders out there like Miguel. And once again, Miguel, thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing what you're going to do next.
Pam, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you.
Got it.
Take care.
Bye bye.